Should we do it? Let's do it.
When I couldn't get a teaching job because of No Child Left Behind, I had to pivot.
What are some of those actionable steps that you're telling your clients?
Who has the power?
How did you know you were ready for that?
People are applying to everything.
Where I'm like, oh, what if I get fired from this? I met Allison on LinkedIn, and very quickly I realized how remarkable she was, not only in the fact that I related to her because we came from alternative backgrounds coming into this industry, but that she is one of the few people I feel with a lot of visibility and a lot of activity in the social media space, especially LinkedIn, in the area of the industry that is focused on recruiting. So, hey,
thank you for that. And I think you're remarkable as well. And the shared backgrounds that Fly is mentioning is an education in the arts. I think Fly is on the theater side of things. I was an art teacher. That was my art education degree that I went to school for. So naturally, here we both are in commercial real estate. Makes a ton of sense. And we're having a great time.
And you are the founder of CRE Recruiting. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that company is, what you're doing, how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I couldn't get a teaching job because of No Child Left Behind, I had to pivot. And I was lucky enough to talk my way into an executive assistant role at a family office that had an owner's rep commercial real estate development company. And so I got a taste for the business, and then later on found myself going down the recruiting rabbit hole, and eventually wound up at Marcus and Millichap in their corporate offices in Calabasas, and worked for them, worked for Colliers International, recruiting brokers, teams of brokers, identifying acquisition targets, small M&A, and doing everything from cold call all the way through onboarding and integration with our business, in addition to establishing campus recruiting programs and initiatives and a whole variety of different things. So enjoyed the work, not necessarily the environment, and decided to found CRE Recruiting because I was asked by peers and friends in the industry that I had just built up over time all of their recruiting questions. And so I founded that company a little over 5 years ago, and we've been going strong ever since. We work with folks all across the spectrum within commercial real estate, from investor owner developers to lenders, both traditional and bank, CRE tech, prop tech, a little bit of brokerage, and kind of every nook and cranny in between, all the way from entry level to, mid-career and executive level. And national. I've always done everything nationally, which is fun too.
The articulation of that was really professional, by the way.
Thank you. I get asked that question a bunch, so I have the answer ready.
In the conversations that you're having in, both in the larger community and then also with your work, what are some of the challenges or trends that you're noticing, like from, maybe we could even just zoom in on the last year of hiring, recruiting, what the experience has been like for people on both sides of the fence, and maybe even lead to what that might indicate about what the landscape looks like going into this year.
For sure. So I like to think of hiring as a pendulum in terms of who has the power. And we spent a good few years where the candidates and the people had the power. And now the power is kind of in the hands of the companies, the organizations who are actually doing the hiring. That's because we saw a huge drop off of hiring due to, the high interest rate environment, the slowing transactional volume, and some other geopolitical factors that really influence our country's hiring. So really, whenever there are fewer opportunities and more people searching for those opportunities, the companies have the ability to drive compensation down. They have the ability to, kind of extend hiring processes, add additional layers of complexity, maybe even, change roles and responsibilities, expect a little bit more, have control over, whether it's a fully in office versus hybrid versus remote situation. They're just really calling the shots at this point in the market cycle. And that's normal. We've been through this before. The pendulum always returns and swings back in the other direction. And I think we'll start to see that hopefully maybe towards the middle to latter part of this year, where you'll have many more opportunities in the market. I know some folks who do what I do are always proselytizing about, what's going to happen in the market. I do quite often because I'm always trying to read the tea leaves. And, the one thing I would say about the last few years is that it's been very unpredictable, where the first 5 years of my career, you could kind of set a watch to what the market would do. Every January, you would have, new year, new me. I'm ready for new opportunities. The commissions reset at zero, and, people are ready to kind of explore their options. You also have then another period of movement, I would say towards the end of Q1, beginning of Q2, because the folks on the corporate or in-house side of real estate are getting their bonuses from the prior year, and then they're starting to leave. We've also seen some pent-up frustration and demand because folks who would have left or would have explored their options because they're frustrated at their current companies haven't done so because the lack of opportunities out there. So I do think the moment that the market starts to improve, you are going to see a similar effect to the Great Resignation. We'll have to come up with a new phrase for it. But I do think there's at least a year or two of pent-up demand of people wanting to leave, but just not having enough avenues to explore and to depart. And so as soon as that tips, I think we'll have the pendulum switch back into the candidates' favor.
So for a lot of folks, whether they are, early career, students entering the workforce, what is this experience going to be like for them if they're coming into a moment when the pendulum is swinging in a place where they may not really be able to latch on?
Sure. It's really interesting because the last few years, I think a lot of folks who have been on the exit ramp from undergraduate and graduate programs maybe haven't found the opportunities that they were looking for when they graduated. So I think that there's still some, pent-up demand there from people for early career entry-level opportunities. I'm seeing that when I'm doing searches that might be only, a year or two's worth of experience. You've got people with many more years who are applying, or people who are brand new applying, because there just haven't been enough of those early career opportunities. So I think the competition there will still continue to be a little bit steep, because I think you've got folks who never really matriculated into the industry as they planned on, and a lot of folks who might have gone into finance or related industries hoping to transition over. So I would say, to those folks, the competition might be a little stiff. I think anything you can do to differentiate yourself, if that's creating your own website, if that's really being a thought leader on social media. I still believe, LinkedIn is like beachfront property in Malibu in the 60s. Like, nobody is taking advantage of it in great enough of a, nobody is taking advantage of it when I look at those, folks from a career standpoint. There's a very thin pool of candidates that I can think about that even have a detailed LinkedIn profile. So that's what I would say is probably the best thing for them to do.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there. I think Fly and I are like, I don't know why no one's spending time on LinkedIn, but it is a gold mine for connections and just really showing who you are to possible connections or employers. You said the pendulum swung and swung and swung again. I imagine that's saying 2020 power was probably with the employers, 2021 and 2022, probably the candidates. And then 2023 into 2024 was probably back to the employers. Is that an accurate statement?
I think that's fair. I would say, at the initial sort of outset of COVID, you did have a lot of the major firms start to lay off people en masse. And this is something that we see every time there's a market correction or recession. The big firms typically are staffing up in a way that's not sustainable for a down market. And we had that hiccup for 3 months where we didn't know how it was going to be. And then the transactional volume in the market picked back up. And so then some of those same companies rehired folks at lower compensation, maybe less years of experience. And so there have been, within even certain years, a back and forth just in 1 year. And I would say 2020 was indicative of that.
And from a perspective outside of real estate, I'm sure you have many people who may have a high paying tech job or may have a finance background and they say, hey, I think I can do real estate because they saw some video online of how easy it is. What's the dynamic between external people wanting to come into the real estate market through recruiting? Like, are those people probably not looking for jobs as much in the real estate market now, or are you seeing still the same amount of interest? Are people leaving the real estate industry because they want more stability? What does that look like from your point of view?
Yeah, this is a super good question because anytime there's a hiccup in the market, we get a lot of time in the airwaves as an industry. You know, real estate is doing this and oh my goodness, the market that. And I think we're unfortunately one of the first kind of bellwether industries in terms of when the economy starts to suffer. We start to experience that a little bit sooner. We also tend to recover, I think, sometimes a little bit sooner, with the exception of like certain markets, depending on what type of crisis we've just endured. Right now, I don't really see a ton of folks trying to transition in. I have seen folks who might have come out of an undergraduate degree, realize that the market isn't what they want the market to be, and decide to piggyback into a graduate program. I think that's pretty common in an economy like this, that people, you know, maybe fast track a degree program that they might have waited a few years for in any other, you know, sort of setting. Let's
imagine you're talking to a 27-year-old who they've been working at their job for the last 4-ish years.
Mm-hmm.
They've done pretty well, but they're just kind of itching for something more. What's your advice as of end of January 2025?
Yeah.
Is it, hey, let's wait until the summer, or hey, let's start posting on LinkedIn to build up a brand? What are some of those actionable steps that you're telling your clients?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is to do a compensation review, because if you've been with the same company for the last 4 years, it's likely that you might not have even gotten the cost of living increases to keep up with inflation. And so that's the first thing to look at. If you look at the last few years, inflation has gone crazy. And now they're saying, the IMF is saying that probably will have stabilized 2% inflation. And now you're seeing, I just saw today, Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan is doing across the board 2% cost of living increases, even though they've got record breaking $58.5 billion worth of, you know, profit or whatever. So that's what I would do first. One, check to make sure that you are being fairly compensated, that you have had cost of living increases. Hopefully you've also had raises and promotions in that time. If you haven't, I would make the case for a conversation with your superior about that. I would come armed with compensation surveys and data that you've gotten from your peers. A great way to be a leader and to also make connections within the industry is to reach out to people in your same cohort, in your same subject matter expertise area, and say, hey, I'm about to have a conversation to renegotiate my compensation. I'm collecting data. I will completely scrub your name from the data. I will then provide you a copy of the data when I'm done having this conversation. And so we can all kind of better our position. That's a really smart thing to do. And then there's also surveys. If people want to reach out to me, I have some surveys that I can share with them so they have a better understanding of where they fit in the market. So that's number one, understand where your compensation is. You should always negotiate that anyway, even if you intend to leave. But I would say in the process of evaluating your opportunities, definitely do post more on LinkedIn and think about, you know, if for instance, I was having a conversation with a candidate today that is early career, probably 3 years total experience. He's in a secondary market in the US and he works in research. And so he's contemplating opportunities because at a certain point, you've almost learned everything you can learn about the research function unless you grow in terms of management or leadership or what have you. So he's thinking about his next steps. And with that in mind, I'm asking him, you know, what are the things that you want to learn? What do you want to see in the next steps in your career? And if, let's say, he wants to go from research into acquisitions, Well, there's a whole bunch of content that he can create that is going to magnetize the folks that are interested in acquisitions in his particular market, who are investors, owners, developers, users, etc. And so you can start to create content that speaks to the audience and gets the connections for those companies that you are hoping to interview with. And you can start, if you don't want to create your own posts, please start by commenting and engaging on other people's posts. And that makes you a known quantity before you even apply or reach out or ask for anything.
When I think back to how our relationship started, like that is very much exactly how you and I found each other, right? It's like I was posting things, you saw them, you sent me a message. I was like, oh, look at our shared background. And it was like, let's chat. And I was also in a place that I, really benefited from your advice. In fact, some of your advice just from those few conversations that we have had, like, is advice that I implement, like, weekly, sometimes daily, depending on the situation. But, and of course you're engaging with people and you're putting, your content out there as well. I'm curious to hear about your perspective, sort of shifting from recruitment, but then into, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're somebody who has a very specific niche, but insanely knowledgeable about the landscape of the industry, right? Which I think in your position is really, really necessary. But I'm curious, as someone who transitioned out of working for a specific company into working for themselves and partnering with people, how did you know you were ready for that? What kind of support systems, and structures did you need to have in place to start that? Because I know a lot of people, like us or, adjacent to us and, and in our community are folks who are, interested in or already are doing it for themselves.
Good question. I don't know that I ever thought I was ready. I was the person who is perpetually like learning, reading a book, taking a course, watching a webinar, trying to get to a point where I felt like I would be ready. I think the universe has other plans, and if we don't move ourselves in advance, the universe will move us. And that's what happened to me. I was in, not a great environment, and I had to raise my hand and say, hey, there's a problem here. And when I did that, the person who was causing my problems was fired, and that was a Friday. And then I was fired on the following Monday. So my story wasn't this valiant leap into entrepreneurship. It was more like I was pushed and I had to figure it out. I had to support myself. I didn't come from a family that was in commercial real estate. I didn't come from any sort of golden parachute situation. And so it was survival for me. But I also knew inherently that I wanted to be an entrepreneur way back from that experience working in the family office. That was the first time I understood that you could work for yourself and not for another company, because everyone in my family always had a job, and that's just what you did. You went to work, and it kind of sucked, and you did it for 30 years, and then you retire, and then probably you die. And that was the understanding that I had. So for me, it was more about survival. It was about those relationships and people that I had poured into while I was still in corporate. I did a lot of favors. I had a lot of conversations. I fixed a lot of resumes. I gave a lot of people advice and made a lot of introductions. And thankfully for me, when I was out there on my own and I launched my website, I went to a conference that I had been a regular at for a number of years, like the next weekend. And I got my first few clients there because people already knew me. They trusted me. A lot of people wanted to help me because I had helped them. And it was just like this virtuous circle that I was like leaping into. But for me, it wasn't as much of my decision. It was the universe like, hey, you're out of here. And let's make it work. And I've made it work. And I'm very happy here on the other side 5 years later.
Allison, for anybody who is interested in connecting with you, whether it be about their journey, the pendulum swinging, what it's like to be forced into entrepreneurship and then like totally smash it once you've taken the leap, how can people find you?
Sure. Probably the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. It's Allison S. Weiss. The S is for Savannah. there's ironically a lot of Allison Weisses, so I had to designate that. But feel free to find me on LinkedIn. My email is really simple too. It's just Allison at CRE Recruiting, and it's ALLISON. And you can also find my website, crerecruiting.com, and more than happy to chat with anybody.
Wicked.
That's awesome. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun being really professional with you guys.
I hope you feel better.
You too.
My life doesn't get better, but I've had a few moments today where I'm like, oh, what if I get fired from this job?
Fly and I were talking, and we said, hey, we want to get a pulse for not the real estate market, but the real estate jobs market. So I thought you were a perfect person to get your experience and just overall thoughts on. We're going to have another guest on later in the episode to talk about. She's a recruiter, and she'll talk about more of like higher level positions. But personally, I'm very interested in what does the job market look for students. And I know you're looking for jobs, and you may have just landed one. So let's dig in and talk a little bit about that. And Fly has a unique perspective, but she got called into some important meetings. So we'll talk, and it's, our podcast series is called Really Professional, and it's kind of a joke because we're not really professional, but we're talking about the professional things. So be comfortable and be relaxed, and let's just talk shop. And and why don't we start with you, Ben? Just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I guess to kick things off, my name is Ben Esser. I'm a fourth-year student at Ohio State studying finance and real estate. I'm originally from just north of Pittsburgh, and then transitioned to the Columbus market. And then at Ohio State, I am the leader of the real estate club and then also a finance club. So I'm working a lot with students, trying to help them land internships, working a lot with recruiters, and trying to see how we can bridge the gap between students and industry. So, but super happy to be on and to talk with you.
And Ben's a fellow Buckeye, so that's how we got connected. Ben's been kind of the model student on what you go to university for, studying real estate and what it looks like, job opportunities, all of that stuff. He's president of the real estate club, as he said, and he's kind of my go-to guy on, hey, what's the student experience look like right now? So, Ben, when I was in school, which wasn't that too long ago, but I am getting older and older each day, it was kind of two different options. If you were kind of a salesperson, you went into brokerage. If you didn't want a cold call, you told yourself you were analytical and you went into the finance world. Is that kind of the two directions that most of your classmates and you are going in? And if not, what are the different opportunities you're seeing in your personal experience or other classmates?
Yeah. It's tough to answer that, right? Because I don't know inside everyone's head, but I do know brokerage and those analytical fields in finance are still very common. But if I'm being realistic right now, people are applying to everything and essentially trying to get their hands involved with everything. So it's not just looking at brokerage or just more of an analytical finance, but maybe they're focusing on maybe property management or development, or even transitioning, just going more corporate finance, right? There's not one, box that fits, what everyone's striving for. But like the main takeaway is that, landing these jobs are kind of tough right now. I know people have applied to 100 plus, 200 plus applications to only hear back from maybe 5 to 10 interviews, right? They're applying to everything that's online. And I guess that's another tricky part, is like a lot of jobs that are posted online are not necessarily looking to be filled. They're looking to get students in their pipeline to essentially, keep reaching out to them, seeing how, the job market is on their half, not necessarily looking for jobs to be filled. So essentially, students are trying to apply for whatever they can and get their hands on, any opportunities. But I would say brokerage is still very common, especially in markets. I think that is very market specific. Here in Columbus, we're constantly growing. I mean, deals are still happening, might not be happening as the rate as what we want, but brokerage is very, very common still. And I think for students to have that, that drive, that motivation, that hustle, who's willing to be that perfect salesperson, those jobs are still very, very much out there for them. So that's a very common career path. However, we are still pushing for students to take those, high-end finance or real estate jobs, whether that's in development, private equity, investment banking. We're still trying to, get students the capabilities so that they can go out there and do good work in those fields.
And when you talk to these students that are coming to your real estate club, or, you're mentoring someone in the College of Business, what do you kind of lay out as the game plan for, hey, over the next 4 years, if you want to land a job, what does it look like? I mean, I know you've had plenty of experiences with internships and whatnot, but what does that look like for the average Joe, or what does it look like for, hey, you need this if you are planning to get this type of job?
It's what it comes down to is separating yourself from the rest of the pack, right? Like, there's so many students, hungry students that are looking for jobs. There's only limited jobs that are looking to be filled in specific markets that you want. What I say is you got to separate yourself, and you do that not only through getting good grades, but also, outside of school, connecting with people, constantly working, your network, getting involved in clubs that put you out in front of industry, utilizing other resources that your school might offer, and, making connections like you, Casey. Like, I can't imagine how many people I met just through you. But the main thing that I really focus on, especially for freshmen and sophomores, is that the earlier you start, the better, right? As a sophomore, I think it's, gaining experience as a sophomore going into your junior year is exceptional when you're looking to get that next internship. So I always tell sophomores, like, hey, I know you might not have taken a business class yet, but don't be afraid to go and apply to that finance job. Or don't be afraid to go apply to go work in New York City. Even if it says we're only accepting juniors, I don't care. Apply for it, because you never know. Maybe a junior might pull out and they still are looking for someone to come fill in, and you might really like that job. So I'm always like, earlier is better. So, fall freshman or fall sophomore year, let's try to get that sophomore internship. And then I tell them, don't stop. Once you get that internship, pivot into your junior year internship. A lot of big companies like BlackRock, Apollo, they're all hiring come spring of your sophomore year. Investment bankers are all hiring spring of that sophomore year. So you really want to just be on it. And earlier is better. Now, when we're talking about commercial real estate, this can be kind of tough, because a lot of these smaller firms aren't necessarily looking to hire, say, a year out in advance. Just because, with market conditions, that, we don't know where the treasury yields are going to go and how the bond market's going to react. They might not want to take on that risk to hire someone so far out. So that's another thing I keep in mind. Like, okay, even as a senior, right, we're going into, January, February, even as a senior, if you don't have your dream position, don't stop yet. It's all gas, no brakes, right? Because you never know if they might get new deals in their pipeline and they need help right away. A lot of, smaller firms, which are great firms, are just looking to hire a little bit closer to the start date. So, yes, the market is tough, but essentially you have to separate yourself and hustle to get these jobs. They're not going to land in your lap.
Yeah, that's good advice on all fronts, between, hey, this is kind of the general timing of you need to be doing this by then, and also just, hey, they're going to meet with 30 people, they're going to have 60 phone calls, whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to say they're studying real estate or studying finance, or, they've got some lawn mowing,
Yep.
company that they started in high school. So
that's me. Yep.
So I think that's helpful advice for everyone listening, whether it's a student who's interested in, hey, I want to reach my goals, or on the flip side, you know, these 30-year-olds who may be looking to hire someone and understand, hey, what does the college market look like? This is a great example. I've seen a lot of college kids who have an internship their sophomore year, summer. They work part-time during junior year. They work full-time during their second semester, senior year. Like, I've seen more qualified students than I have some 29-year-olds transferring over to the real estate industry. But there's still limited spots for everyone, which is crazy, because in my opinion, there's always a spot for different skills and different personalities in the real estate world. But with this market, it's a little tougher. Can you talk a little bit about your personal experiences? What have the last 4 years looked like, and then kind of dial in on what the last 6 months have looked like, and what you'll be doing once you're done?
To give you a little bigger picture, I declared that I wanted to study finance and real estate. I knew I wanted to go into commercial real estate my junior year. However, I'd already accepted a position at, like, say, a big four, like, accounting consulting firm. And I just went in there with an open mindset, right? I just wanted to learn as much as I can, take a few big points away from those internships. Fortunately, I was able to get a return offer, but I knew I wanted to pursue commercial real estate, and I'd rather not just settle, but really get out there and try to get a job that I really want. So I entered in this fall looking for jobs. I was looking more on the private equity, development, capital market space of commercial real estate. That's where my interest lies. And I did everything I can, right? I mean, just being through the real estate club I'm in, I'm put in front of hundreds of industry professionals, and I'm networking like crazy. I've had to apply to at least 50 positions. But those positions I just applied to on LinkedIn, those don't do anything. All of my, interviews that I got are from face-to-face conversations, picking up the phone, calling people. Email is great, but realistically, real estate is one of those industries that you have to make connections with people and create a story with them. So I was fortunate enough, I was able to get, 4 interviews with, like, the top 3 firms that I wanted to work with. And these interviews were, crazy. I went through about 4 or 5 interviews for each firm, to the point where I'm creating models, I'm doing case competitions. I've had to at least take up, 10 to 15 hours of, partners and MD's time just interviewing. So, props on them taking that effort and really interviewing a select few candidates like me. But at the end of the day, I wasn't even sure if they're really hiring to fill the position. For example, I got a phone call from a great firm, and they were looking at, potentially filling a development position. And they asked if I wanted to interview for it. I went through 6 rounds of interviews for them. And after the 5th round, I went out and grabbed a beer with, one of the, say, senior analysts or partners, right? And it was great. Like, I felt like there was a connection. I really wanted to work there. I saw value that I could create for them. But at the end of the day, when it came time to make a hiring decision, they were like, we are unable to really make a decision just yet. I mean, that could have been on multiple things, right? That could have been based on my experience. That could have been on, my poor interviewing skills. Like, who knows, right? So, but at the end of the day, like, I think a lot of places are looking to get students, top quality students, into their pipeline. They're just not sure about flipping the switch and saying, hey, we're ready to hire 6 to 8 months out in advance for a new hire, right? And that's just, that's tough. But fortunately, I have found, a great position that I'm interested in. That's more on the capital markets securitization side of affordable housing, that I'm looking at starting come this summer. So summer 2025. But that's just my experience. I know similar experiences among, my fellow students and my friends. We're really hustling, and I'm starting to see a lot of students accepting jobs that might not be the exact positions that they want, just because they're trying to get whatever they can get or they're trying to accept anything they get their hands on. And they're still great positions and look forward to them. But, if you asked them, say 4 or 5 months ago, is this what you picture yourself doing? It might not have been their first answer, right? So I guess I don't really know from everyone's perspective, but it is definitely an interesting time trying to find a job right now.
Yeah, that's all great feedback for not only employers but students. Applying, they need to be calling, they need to be touching face to face, they need to be reaching out 12 months in advance, 6 months in advance, and also be open to, hey, you might take on a project out of the blue 2 months from now. Just so you know, I'm here for that. So congrats to you and all the people who have found jobs coming into this different market than, because the ironic part is when you were learning about what commercial real estate was, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was, you couldn't lose money if you tried. You got your real estate license, became an industrial broker, sold a plot of land to Google, and made millions of dollars in year one, whatever. Like now it's a little bit of a more stable market, I guess, maybe, or a little bit of a correction. But
you gotta hustle.
You gotta hustle, and that's when it comes down to it. You can't really time the market, whether that's perfectly on the stock market, perfectly real estate, or the job market. And eventually, whatever job you get, whether it's being a real estate salesperson or a property manager, or you could be cleaning. I started with throwing out the trash at a commercial property, and that got me connected different places. So in reality, none of this goes as planned, and you just got to start somewhere and leverage connections, and it'll end up getting on the career path that you wanted. But it is a survival of the fittest, people who can make the most out of these trying times. But I thought your experience and your advice is super valuable for all sorts of the people in the real estate industry. Again, whether they're an 18-year-old thinking about getting into real estate, seeing you as kind of the model student of, hey, here's the reality of the situation. I've done all the good things. I've done all the internships. I'm president of the real estate club. This is what my life looks like. And also on the employer side, hey, how do I better understand what these girls and guys are going through when they're looking for companies? So great experience, great stuff. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I want to be mindful of your time. Bummed fly couldn't make this portion of it. How about this? If anyone has any questions, or they need some help with, hey, I'm a 20-year-old in college and I'm trying to do really well in real estate, how can they get a hold of you?
I would say you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My username should just be Ben Esser, ESSER. I'm always happy to help, either whether it's looking at resumes, getting you in front of other students or recruiters, or even just you want to sit down and talk shop about finance, real estate. I'm all for it. So please don't, hesitate to reach out to me.
Yeah, Ben's the man. Glad we've stayed in contact over the years, and looking forward to seeing your success over the many years ahead.
Thank you, Casey.
All right.
I'll
see you, man. Appreciate you.
Bye.